Hey, well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Dallas Morning News first DM and downloads webinar. Pretty exciting. 1,000 people have signed up, and also this video will be shown later. But this is the 2020 Watchdog Guide to Filing Your Property Tax Protest. And I'm Dave Lieber, the Watchdog at the Dallas Morning News. I would like to start off with a little limerick with a couple of my my co-panelists. Say hi, Glenn. Say hi. This
Hello.
is called Bringing Down the House, Appraised Value, and it's written by Bruce Davidson, Mr. Limerick of Carrollton, Texas. Ready, guys?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. So, you bought your American dream, so proud that you're starting to beam, till the county addressed, the bounty assessed, and now you're starting to scream. But you always know you have a say over ransom they want you to pay. Because they work for you, and if they only knew how bad you have wallet decay.
So when you present to Big Brother, you'll need this and that from the other, learning truth from the shark so you don't embark on moving back in with your mother. And don't allow equalization, because maybe you took a vacation. Over adding that din, they're adding it in as they look for value inflation.
And remember, each date is the headline. You're sunk if you're missing the deadline, because they'll laugh in your face and wrap up your case and usher you off to the breadline. So you'll take them the proof, evidentiary, that appraisal's the highest this century. And they ought to do penance, along with a sentence of stay in the state penitentiary.
So file by the middle of May, or a month from the day they convey that your middle-class mansion with little expansion was bumped to appraisal chalet. And whether home is as pricey as Shaq's is, or property value like Dax is, be brief and concise for relief on the price of your property value, not taxes. Bruce Davidson, thank you, from Carrollton. He wrote that just for today. So you guys did good. Before I introduce you, I'd like to give a quick overview. You know, the goal here is basically to teach you how to file property tax protest if you haven't, and it's also to teach you, if you already have, what the latest information is. And so this year is a particularly horrible year for property tax for about 4 or 5 reasons, which I quickly want to share with you. First of all, we have this, Senate Bill 2, which is the brand new property tax law. It's pretty big, and so that complicates things incredibly. Then we have the problem right now where that's supposed to limit property tax increases, but it apparently won't, because cities and counties are looking for a way around it. It's supposed to be limited to 3.5% and 2.5% for cities, counties, and school districts before they have to have an election. But now it looks like they're going to use some kind of emergency declaration, mumbo jumbo, to maybe get around it. That was the subject of my column today, where I call out Governor Abbott for not knowing this, which we can get into in a little bit. Let's see, the third reason why this is crazy is obviously because of the coronavirus. And Glenn and Will, you don't know this yet. I just got a note from the man I consider the top real estate expert in Dallas-Fort Worth, and that's Steve Brown, the real estate editor from the Morning News. And he just told me that his sources tell him that in the Dallas Central Appraisal District, residential are supposed to go up 8% this year on average, and commercial building go up a whopping 40% on average for appraised value. The other complication this year is everybody has a different deadline. These are all the different counties. You can see there, it's all over the, there's 5 different deadline dates. So that's bad. And finally, you know, how are we going to handle protests with social distancing? You know, I'm a big guy that has my own flag. Everybody file a protest. I've been running this campaign for several years. I've been into this property tax thing for about 10 years, and I have a definite bias. I just want to read you some of the headlines
309
of some of my stories, just so you know where my bias is. Biggest scam in Texas when elected officials pretend to be anti-tax but actually raise your taxes. This is how the state of Texas confuses you about the cost of your property taxes.
315
How you and your neighbors can lower your property tax. Why paying your property tax without a protest is a sucker's game. Those are just some of the many stories I've written. And also, I'll be taking some questions. I already have a whole bunch from the audience, but Watchdog at dallasnews.com. If you see me looking at my phone, I'm not being rude. I'm looking at your questions. Let's see. So I guess without further ado, I'd like to introduce my first panelist. His name's Glenn Goodrich, and he runs a propertytax.io website, which gives you, for about $70, most of the information you need to go in and protest with. He'll explain all that to you. But Glenn, he handles Denton, Dallas, Tarrant, Collin, and Harris counties. Right, Glenn? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. So that's interesting news about the Dallas residential values, because that's what I'm going to focus on a lot. That's what my website caters to, is residential properties. I can't say I'm too shocked by that, because, you know, the first graph that I open up my presentation with is here's a picture of the stock market, you know, from 1 year. So from May 2019 to May of today. And you see a big green box right here. That's the world the appraisal district is living in. And this big red box down here, that's the world that the taxpayers are living in. And so there's a big disconnect between your value on January 1st and what we're currently experiencing in our economy. And so that's what the appraisal district is using as a basis to increase the values on. It's actually the law. So not to rag on the appraisal district too hard, they're just following the law to do that. But it's going to be a challenge this year for sure. And hate to see that taxpayers are going to be burdened with higher tax bills in a potential recession, likely recession we're going to see. Also, you know, I didn't know that about Dallas. I do work in Harris County, and I kind of was looking at Harris County as a potential crystal ball for this year. They released values early on, and you know, the median increase, this is just the median increase in residential was 4% there. So it sounds like the residents of Dallas are going to get it worse than they did in Harris County. But there were pockets in Harris County that saw well over 10% increase. And keep in mind that Harris also had an oil issue going on around this time, and still do. So they got pounded pretty hard. And so I'm not surprised that that happened again in Dallas, because the biggest county in Texas had no shame about increasing values, and just Dallas following suit. You know, also outside of values, and Dave, you alluded to this a little bit in your monologue, that you know, cities and ISDs are worried about budgets. That's a big deal, because that's how they look at that for tax rates. And so we got to worry about a two-front war this year. We got values from the appraisal district, which we got some inside info from Steve Brown that values are going to go up in this area. And I think we can also be prepared for tax rate increases as well. These are just some headlines from around the area that show that. Just to kind of bring it home into a real world example, what that means for everybody. You know, we hear a lot about freezing values. And that was upsetting to me, because I was like, what about the tax rates? Because Senate Bill 2 was this big come together moment when it was supposed to be that the local taxing jurisdictions took ownership of their part of the tax bill. And everyone was all about freeze values, freeze values. The politicians were some of those people are the ones that decide tax rates or have input on tax rates, but they were never talking about tax rates. And Dave, you wrote this in a column that, you know, if they can increase the value 5%, say, but they set the tax rate to 0%, that means $0 in taxes. That's the power of the tax rate right there. Senate Bill 2 is going to compound this issue potentially, because they can not only increase the tax rate, but they can go back up to this 8% increase before Senate Bill 2. So are we going to go back to the old ways because of the disaster declaration? In this example, that could potentially increase somebody's tax bill by 13%. So, and that's going to be during a likely recession. So that's quite a bit of a financial burden we're going to put on taxpayers during a really hard time. So this year is especially important to pay attention to your property tax. Increasing property values, that's likely going to happen. In fact, I think we know it's going to happen now. Increasing tax rates, maybe. I think there's a good argument to be made that you need to watch out for that. Wages falling, unemployment rising, all that put together, higher tax bills in a recession. So we really need to be paying attention this year, and we need to get the word out. And if you're attending this webinar live, we're probably preaching to the choir, but you guys need to spread the word to everybody else in your neighborhood. Post on your nextdoor.com, post on Facebook pages about, you know, getting people out to take some action this year and make them aware, because a lot of people just kind of skate by and don't pay attention to property tax, but it really comes to bite people financially. The most direct impact you have on your tax bill is protesting the appraisal district's value. I'm a big proponent of doing it the right way, though. I think you need to be evidence-based when you file an appeal. That makes a decision maker's job really easy to lower the value. I'm defining a decision maker as somebody at the appraisal district because, believe it or not, you present evidence at the appraisal district in an informal, maybe you file online appeal, submit your evidence. A lot of times people get a reduction that way. But a lot of times you don't. And sometimes you have to go to the appraisal review board, and those are also decision makers. So you got two sets of decision makers. Either way, they're both going to be evidence-based and driven. So at propertytax.io, one of the things we do is help people figure out where to focus their evidence gathering process really easily. If you go to my website, www.propertytax.io, you click the instant and free analysis, and you just type in your address, and we'll give you this nice reduction potential indicator that's based on what market sales are doing in your area. So it's not just every market sale, it's actually the ones that are credible to use in comparison against your property based on how similar they are in size and year built, things like that. I remember when Dave, you were using our site at the beginning, you actually scored a red right here in a big reduction potential red, and it said weak. And I hated to see that because I would have loved for my product to help somebody like Dave Lieber, but it did help him in a way because it told him to focus his efforts not on market sales because that wasn't going to help him, but instead focus on condition. And I think that saved Dave a lot of time up front, and he focused his efforts on disputing the condition of his property. He showed some pictures of some scraped hardwoods on his floor, and he was able to get a reduction that way. So I think it's really helpful either way you go. We tell you where you stand really quickly and easily with recent sales, and all that's for free. You don't have to sign up for that. So in over 10 years of working in property tax, I've learned that appraisal districts have a huge technological advantage. When I was first starting out and just kind of feeling my way out with things, I would use recent sales kind of like a list from MLS. And I was tired of getting hit with this argument. Well, after we run the comps through our system and making all these adjustments, the value actually indicates much higher than what you're presenting. And I kind of was put on my back heels there and surprised by that. And I realized that the appraisal district just have these $1 million systems at their disposal, really easy for them to dispute your value or try to tear up your argument. And so I set out to fix that. Here's just an example so I went to Texas A&M, I graduated there. TexAgs is a great forum for all kinds of conversations, and Harris County, actually, it's really active for property tax, but I've noticed up here in the Dallas area, it's not so active for property tax. So maybe if you're an A&M grad and you're on TexAgs, we can start changing that and be more active on our local chapter here. But this guy experienced exactly what I was experiencing. He had this comp that he was using down the street. He thought it was going to save him $11,000. And after they ran it through their system, they said, nope, it's actually coming out to be right where you're valued at. And so he was upset by that because he wasn't able to get a reduction and didn't really understand the system. So at propertytax.io, we level the playing field with the appraisal district in just a few clicks of a mouse. We make it easy to produce evidence compliant with the CAD system.
Yours is
Here's a screenshot of what we do. First of all, keep in mind, you don't have to use my evidence to do this or my app to do this. The concepts apply in general. So our executive summary is brief and concise. It tells the decision makers exactly the value you're asking for. So again, you don't need my evidence to do that. You can decide your own value, but be upfront and obvious about the value that you're asking for. And then tell them why you're asking for that value. In this case, they're using sales comparisons. And the appraisal districts like to use maps and all that to kind of gain credibility with the decision makers, mainly at the ARBs. And so we decided maps were pretty important. So we include a lot of maps in ours, and that lets you take control over telling them about your property instead of relying on the appraisal district telling them about your property.
Keep submitting questions to me. Should I say a few things?
So again, we take the recent sales and we map them out, and we actually adjust those using all of their adjustments that they use in their system, and we cater it to each appraisal district because they're all different and they all do things a different way. And so we had to just say, okay, we just have to create a custom way of doing it for every appraisal district. So now you're speaking the language of the appraisal district with our app. I put this in here, additional improvements. This is all open records information, and a lot of times you can go on a website and get this information if you just look up your property. But a lot of people don't pay attention to this additional improvements part, and that's why I see a lot of mistakes being made. Things like attached garages and covered porches. Who would know that a property has $15,000 assigned to it in covered porches? That can be a big deal because sometimes, another property only has covered porches that are 5,000 and you're off $10,000 in your thinking on that. So just look those up online, or again, we make it all available conveniently in my app, Property Tax IO. Your biggest advantage though is that you know more about your property than anybody else. You can go beyond the CAD system and tell the appraisal district something that they don't already know about your property, mainly through photos and comments that you've made. So here's a good headline. This is a story from a fellow Dallas Morning News writer, Dave. I don't know if you know her, Leona Allen. She references you in the article that she wrote. This was from a couple of years ago, but the headline is, "Here's how I knocked $13,000 off my property tax appraisal in 30 minutes. The process was so easy. I'm vowing to protest every year." And it should be noted that this was Leona's first year to file a protest. So she's not some pro. Doesn't have a ton of experience. It was her first time doing it, and she had success, and she felt emboldened and wanted to tell everyone else how easy it was. Now, to be clear, Leona did not use my app to do this, but we did take her findings and it inspired a workflow that we built into our app. So here's what Leona did. She filed her protest online. She got a realtor friend to gather recent sales of her neighborhood. And then she got photos from recent sales on Zillow and Trulia. So she just looked up those addresses on Zillow and Trulia. And in her hearing, the district appraiser lowered the value to the average of the recent sales that she brought in. Now, I know that Will is probably looking at this, and I'm also thinking the same thing Will is. I'm looking at this, and there's probably a lot of holes that Leona had in her argument, because as seasoned pros, we're all about how to optimize and make this process perfect. But the bottom line is that Leona took action. She did something, and she went above and beyond what I see a lot of people do, which is just file a protest and forget about it. She did her homework, and she got photos, and she did something different. She showed them that she's done her homework. So at a minimum, if you take away anything from today, it was Leona's first time. If it's your first time and you're thinking about doing it, you can do it. It's really not that hard to do. I think there's a lot more that you can do. I think when you hire a tax agent like Will, he's going to do a lot more for you than what this is, obviously. We're just getting a list of sales. There's all kinds of adjustments that she was probably missing. Who knows if there were comps that were better to use than the ones that she presented. And we also look at the same thing in Property Tax IO. So we try to optimize this experience, but good job, Leona, for taking action and getting a result. And so this is the workflow that it inspired in our app. So you can look at the photos of the sales, and you can show things like, this comp's kitchen is nicer than my kitchen. And you can upload a photo of your own kitchen to compare it side by side. And keep in mind that you don't have to use my app to do this. There's all kinds of resources to get those available. But you could say that, like, it would cost me $25,000 to upgrade my kitchen to look like this comp's kitchen. And so now what you've done is you've overridden the appraisal district's adjustments with your own adjustment, and you're providing photographic evidence to do that. I think that's going to be pretty hard to beat if I'm a district appraiser, because they're not going to have, they're very database driven, and photos are not very database friendly. It's very subjective, and you're giving your opinion about something, but it's pretty obvious when you look at a side-by-side comparison as to which looks better than the other. So that's just an example of how we took Leona's workflow and built it into our system. And here's what it looks like in the report. So it's nice and organized and easy. You can see that here's the, my property, and here's the comp's property, and all the adjustments that are made. We also coach you so you feel empowered with the information that you need to succeed. You have direct access to experts in our online chat or by email. And we also have a ton of resources for free that I'm going to show at the end of the slideshow. If you go to help.propertytax.io, that's our help center, and you can search for things like homestead, and issues about filing a homestead will come up, or protest. And a lot of, we have screenshots and step-by-step instructions on how to protest online with each appraisal district, because they all have their different online protest systems. So we help you navigate that process. Again, all that's free. Just go to help.propertytax.io and search, and we probably have an article for a question that you have. But our goal is to be your coach, not just provide software, but we want to help you succeed. And we know that sometimes that means helping you go above and beyond what the software is already providing to you. So we want to be like your Bill Belichick, and you can be Tom Brady, and I think we'll make a killer combo together. This is a real life example of how we've done that. Believe it or not, so this property is in like a $450,000 home area, and the appraisal district was using $4,000 to value a pool in that area. And this is kind of it was obvious, you'll see from the photos that it's not a $4,000 pool. So these are just some of the angles that you can look at to gain advantages over the appraisal district systems. There's all kinds of different line items besides pools that you could use this for. This is just one example. So again, you don't have to use my app to do this. You can dig into the details on your own, but it's definitely worth digging into because you'll see how this person did that and succeeded. So he was noticed at 448,000. Property Tax IO said I should reduce my value to 425. When I filed my protest, I requested the appraisal district's evidence. That's key. Always do that. The CAD emailed me an offer to reduce the value to 441. Okay. And they provided 4 comps they're using as evidence. So he went in and entered in the comps that they provided him into our system. Okay, nice. It matches exactly the 441 offer that he got, but he noticed that that property has a pool. So he's going to check out the value of what that pool is. Scrolls down and sees, oh, that one's valued at 12,000. Okay. So he looks at a photo of the pool and goes, that does not look like a $12,000 pool, especially in my neighborhood. That looks more like a $25,000 pool. So what he did was he made his own adjustment for that. You can see the number at the top left decreasing down because he's doing that. You notice another property with a pool. Checks that out. Scrolls down, finds the photo of that one. And again, this is a true story. That one was actually valued at 4,000. No way that's valued at 4,000. He's like, more like 25,000. So again, he does the same process, reduces it down. So now he's taken the appraisal district's own evidence and he's gotten their value from 441 down to 433. But he notices that the pools seem to be an issue. So what if you just remove them from the equation altogether? Now he's closer to 431. Okay, that's even better. So using the CAD's own evidence and adding photos showing that the pools are worth way more, the ARB panel members reduced the value to 430. And again, you don't need my app to do that. I think we make it very easy to do something like that, but you can do all this on your own. It's just, you got to look at all the information. Don't just trust and sign off on adjustments that the appraisal district is making. If something doesn't make sense to you, look into it a little bit more. And this is, so he was at his ARB hearing, and this is from our online chat system that he sent. So he got it reduced from 430, he got it reduced to 430. He had the tip on the pool made all the difference. And I like this because this is a little intel on how ARB chairmen think. He said the chair actually thanked him for a concise presentation. And he said, FYI, the owners were on a 07 losing streak before his discussion. So in other words, this ARB wasn't just rubber stamping homeowners coming in and giving them reduction.
Weird.
And he said without us and the report that he couldn't have done it. And so I bring that up because we're not just software and sending you off to do it yourself. We like to coach you and figure out angles that you can use to get the value lower.
This printer isn't.
So 2020 is going to be the year of the remote appeal. Submitting credible evidence in an online protest is what the CADs are begging you to do this year. There's going to be no in-person meetings, meaning written communication is much more important this year. Going back to what the ARB chairman said, being concise is always better. Sometimes it's harder to write one page than it is to write 3 pages. Say exactly what you're asking for and why you're asking for it, and then proceed to back it up with evidence. So this is an example of how we do it in our report with the executive summary. You can do your own version of this, where, again, be right up front about the value you're asking for, and then say why you're asking for that value. In ours, we kind of do some appraisal district speak. So we're speaking the language. So we're saying that all the comps are in this neighborhood code. That's appraisal district speak for the neighborhood that it's in. And then they're all the same building quality. That's how they decide quality of construction, things like that. So it's not hard to do your homework, and it makes a decision maker's job a lot easier. Our biggest reward is when we help someone who's never followed a protest get in the game. The word empowerment comes up repeatedly. I think you saw that from Leona's article that it was her first time. She got a reduction and she felt really excited and really empowered by that. And she wanted to spread the word. So it's really not that hard to do. And it's going to make you feel really good if you take it in, if you can do something that you didn't think you could do before that. And as a coach, there's no better feeling. And you know what? Property Tax IO doesn't have to be the only coach. If you've been through this process before and you've been successful, you can be a coach also. Have that conversation with your neighbor, 6 feet away, but still have that conversation with your neighbor. Talk about it on Facebook, talk about it on Nextdoor, things like that. So again, if you want to go to our free resources, just go to help.propertytax.io, search for something like homestead. We have all kinds of articles on that. We also launched this year a website called propertytaxuniversity.com. We have 4 courses that we've done with that. If you're kind of new to the game and and you just want to know more, I would suggest doing Understanding Your Value or the Texas Property Tax System. If you're a pro, I would do the Evidence and an Appeal because we talk about how to do market values and things like that. And if you just have questions about exemptions, maybe over 65, you're thinking about moving, how does my over 65 tax ceiling transfer work? We have a course on exemptions as well. That covers like homesteads and things like that.
Oh shit. Oh, there it is.
All right, Dave.
Uh-oh. Possible. What's happening? Oh my goodness, I'm so pissed.
Glenn, good. Folks can see why I asked you to be on this, because that is a very, very original website. I have a few questions for you before I introduce everyone to the property tax consultant, Will Wiggins, that I call the Shark. First off, you can't come onto my webinar and use Belichick and Tom Brady as an example. Okay? right when that happened, I just felt like 200 people just dropped off. Okay, just remember, this is Cowboys territory. All right.
I was warned about that, so I apologize, and I should have heeded the advice.
Yeah, you should apologize for that. Some stuff on your website actually costs $70, right? And without doing a commercial, what's the difference between the free stuff and the $70 package?
The $70 was the evidence that you saw right off the bat, and the ability to interact with the comps and make your own adjustments. That's what we charge for. And we actually have a cheaper version that if you're arguing just condition and you can upload your own photos and estimates and things like that, that's $25, and we help you organize the report super fast and easy. Sometimes like size limits can be an issue submitting evidence into the appraisal district, like they have size limits on the file size. So we run it through compression and things like that. Sometimes people get stressed out if they're filing a last minute appeal and they can't upload their evidence because of size. So the $75 one is where you saw me interacting with comps, selecting comps, making adjustments, using photos, things like that. But we also have an express report that you don't have to do any of that. You can just accept our automated report and we spit out everything for you. The other stuff that you saw with the photos and everything, that's customizing our express report. The free stuff is, we spend most of our time focusing on the free stuff because our marketing strategy is to be kind of like the de facto customer service of property tax. So you can chat in with us and talk to property tax experts on our website. That you don't have to sign up or pay for that. So our online chat is super popular. Help.propertytax.io, our help center, is open and completely free. And then Property Tax University is completely free.
Okay, good. One final question for you real quickly. My story today in the paper talks about Governor Abbott saying that we should all get a break on our taxes possibly because of COVID-19. Would you comment on that briefly and explain why I call that out as a falsehood?
Yeah, I mean, on my first slide showed the world that the appraisal district lives in and the world that the taxpayers, Governor Abbott is living in that red box that I showed, the taxpayers box. But that's not the law. The law says that you have to value a property as of January 1st of 2020. Think about how unfair that would be for residents of Harris County if Dallas just decided, oh, you know what, we're gonna set our date of valuation for May 1st to give people a break. That wouldn't be fair to residents of Dallas or of Harris that, they're just a moving ball with the date. So we all have to play by the same rules. I don't understand that comment that Governor Abbott gave. I think it's super confusing for somebody at the highest office in the state to say something like that.
I know it works.
But again, it's January 1st of 2020. That's the date. That's law. That's well established, and that's not debated.
Right, and he said it wasn't that way, so I don't know. All right, that was great, Glenn. Stick around because you're going to help us with the questions. Now I'm going to introduce a fellow who Will Wiggins runs with his partners North Texas Property Tax Services out of Addison, and Will does a lot of different counties. And the reason he's here is because I call him the Shark. And the reason I call him the Shark is because a good friend of mine, Linda Baker, a retired appraisal review board member from Colleyville, she told me this. She said, in every hearing, Will Wiggins is seriously relentless in presenting rational evidence for his clients. He is always the last agent to wrap up the year as a result. It's frequently a contentious hearing, which is exactly what I would want if I had an agent representing me. So, Will, my first question to you, and you can launch into your explanations, but I just want to ask you this. The best, smartest advice I've ever heard from you is you say that people like me should not go into our protest to the appraisal review board and say, my taxes are too high. Oh, help me with my taxes. I can't afford my taxes, because that's a turnoff, and that doesn't help at all. So tell us about that, and then tell us about what you think we should know for 2020.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
I'm so
Can
proud.
you see me okay? Let's see.
Really good at meeting himself.
Yeah, so as a segue there, it's the wrong motivation is the bottom line. It suggests that you're concerned about your taxes, and what you need to be concerned about is your value. That's the only thing in play. And that's as best as I can say it, which kind of brings up the COVID point too. If you go in there, while I agree with both you and Glenn, if you go in there talking about how COVID has done this and that to your value, I will grant a little bit of leeway for the governor in that the law does state that you have 36 months to use comparables. And I'll throw this out as an example I just thought of as I was listening to you. If a property sold for, let's say, $400,000 in October, and a very similar property sold for $300,000 in March, maybe that was the effect of COVID, and they're both allowable. They're both allowable sales, but the only thing that is absolutely certain is that it must be valued as of January 1. But that might give you some, basically offer some input or some evidence into how values are dropping. And in between those two times, perhaps that range of value was 350,000 instead of, say, the 400,000 that was indicated back in October. So just an example there that it could be useful, maybe not, but it could be. So I wouldn't throw it out, but I certainly wouldn't make that one of your key 3 points. And I would emphasize that, to go into every hearing with 3 points. So with that, I'll kind of go through some of my points that I wanted to make. Number one is, don't miss that deadline. You know, you showed an exhibit that had all the different protest deadlines. And while that's true, yeah, that one there, yeah. While that's true, take, for instance, Dallas CAD. They have put out that they will allow protest deadlines up through June 15th as their deadline in Dallas, for instance. So, but the law is specific about a deadline date of May 15th, right? So in Tarrant, for instance, they have sent their notices out, but they've only sent them to 376,000 properties. So if you're one of the 175,000 properties that hasn't been noticed yet, take caution, because districts don't have to send you a notice. If they don't raise your value, they don't have to send you a notice of value. So if they don't, your protest deadline is in fact still May 15th. Okay, so that's something to be especially leery of, no matter what. If you don't get a notice, your protest deadline is May 15th, no matter, that's for the state of Texas. So I just say that, you know, just remember that your protest deadline is either May 15th, that static date, or 30 days after you receive your notice. One thing in that big packet of SB2 that you mentioned is that they have disallowed the ARB to increase your value. I think that's rather significant, because people need to know that there's now there's no risk. They don't have to worry. They can go in there and try to make their fight, and they're disallowed to increase your value. I think that's it's rather important. With that, again, the thing about the COVID and using that in your presentation or not, well, the only appraiser in the room is the one at the district, right? And so they would have to confirm whatever sales that you're using. So oftentimes, if we start to see the actual market be affected by this, which it probably will be because of employment and wages, et cetera, probably will be, but have those effects really shown up in time to affect the January 1 appraisal date? Maybe, maybe not. But you need to leave it on the appraiser in the room to confirm that sale. And if it's on MLS or this and that and the other, then they might include it. But they only have so much time to do that, and that's typically up through March. So I wish you the best with that argument. Another thing about Senate Bill 2, you guys mentioned the 8% versus the 3.5% voted. That's true. I mean, I wish the governor would make an exception, because that Senate Bill 2 actually helped lower and limit the budgets, and this is certainly a time when we need that. Not the other way around. We don't need to go back to higher tax rate. That seems crazy to me, but that is what it is. And while your value may go up, your value may stay the same, but your taxes can still go up. So again, I always say the rubber meets the road at the hearing, at those tax entity hearings, is where you need to be about whether or not you're going to get more taxes. It's just whether or not you allow them to do that by vote. So be cognizant of that. Some people lately, and I've been talking to a few people, they've been confusing the 10% and the homestead limit with this 3.5. A lot of people have been thinking that their homestead is now, it used to be 10% limit, but now it's 3.5. I keep hearing that. A lot of people confused by that. Those are very different things. As you know, the 3.5 and the 8%, the rollback rate, all of that has to do with the tax rates for sure. But the homestead exemption and its limit to your taxable value is and will remain at 10%. So just remember that refers to sort of the taxable or the capped value, assessed value. I'll get into that, and I actually have an exhibit here to show you about what I mean there. But it's just that the 10% has to do with your taxable value, and the other, the 3.5%, has something that entirely different to do with the taxing entities. So keep that in mind. If I can share my screen here, let's see. I'll show you the exhibit that I was offering, and let's see here. So I put together a snippet here of for instance, a DallasCAD website. And you can see here in the highlight, if you go to DallasCAD, they have market value right here. And they show that the market value is 7.5. And then they show that the capped value is 6 million, right? So that 6 million represents the 10% increase from the year prior. I see, was it probably around 5.4 the year prior, and now he was capped, this is last year, but he was capped at 6 million, right? But his market value is 7.5. Right, so they call it capped, and Dallas calls it market. This is a Teleconference website snippet where they call it market and appraised, and you see that the lower one here, the 1.7, compared to their market value of 2.4. So again, this was probably valued around, I don't know, 1.61 the year before, and now it's at 1.74, 10% higher, right? And then they had the market value at 2.4. So there's the big difference between those two. Then when you go to CollinCAD, I give them the star because at least this makes it pretty easy to understand. They have your market value, and they have what's called your ag loss. There's a jurisdictional exception as an appraisal standard that commands that they appraise ag properties a certain way. That's not the case in this example, but you can see that's why the appraised value equals the market value at 3.1. Then they have the homestead cap loss, and in the industry, that's what we recognize as the amount that's lost to the cap, or the 10% limit, the cap loss. But you can see that Colin calls it the assessed value.
We're not getting
see there. So we have assessed value, appraised value, and capped value, all for the same thing. What is the taxable value? And that can certainly be confusing, at times. So if you're confused, what I say is just look for the larger one, right? So the larger one is the one that you can argue. It's as simple as that. On any one of these websites, here, the larger one is the one that you can fight. And that's when you protest, you're fighting the concept of market value. And the bigger one is always the market value, also known as the appraised value, but not in Tarrant, as you can see there. So don't get me started. They all call it different things, but the only one that you can fight if you want a chance to lower your taxes is the bigger of the two, if that makes sense. So how do you do that? Well, you have to understand how they valued, and I'll show you a little snippet here, another snippet rather of what is the appraisal. Actually, the appraisal manual from Tarrant, and you can see here that this is it. This is the trick to how everything and anything is valued in mass appraisal. What's standard 6 under USPAP standards? This is called a modified cost approach. And this looks fancy, but it's right down here. And I won't go too deep into this, but for those of you that want to push pause later on or watch this again, this is it. The market value is just your market adjustment times your replacement cost new minus depreciation plus your land value. It's as simple as that. So that's what we try to do for our clients, is understand each one of these components that makes the market value and make sure it's fair and equal and in level and at a level that's consistent with where it should be. So that may help you understand, at least computer-wise, why it is and how they do what they do. I'll say this too before I show you my next exhibit, that you mentioned the telephone hearings, and I would just offer that that can be good or bad. I was an appraiser at Travis Central Appraisal District, and every once in a while we'd have somebody call in, and they would submit their evidence, and they would give us a call, and it'd be on the phone, right? And I would show their evidence, but it didn't hold as much weight, right? Because I'm there and I'm in the face of the ARB, and they can see me and they can hear me and understand my mannerisms, and that was certainly an advantage for the appraiser. So this year, if you are going to do a telephone hearing, I would recommend to be very cognizant of the evidence that you submit. Make sure that they have it, and make sure that you ask questions like, can you see this? Did you see this? Do you see what I'm talking about? So with that said, I'll give you an example of kind of what we do and provide for, for some of our clients. For instance, in Tarrant, this is a good example of one of our Tarrant grids. And one of the problems in Tarrant that we attack that is different, than the district is this actual year built. See, we believe that the market actually takes into account when properties are built. If it was built in 1950 or if it was built in 2010, that commands an adjustment. And in Tarrant, if you were to walk in there and look at their adjustments or their adjustment schedule, they would not give you credit for that. They only give you credit for the effective year, what they determine your effective year is. So in this case, all the effective years are the same as the actual, but that's not always the case. And unfortunately, they put most of their weight on the adjustment, or all of their weight rather, on the adjustment for what they consider as your year. So if you're in Tarrant, that's something to be really aware of. But all these other adjustments, most of the times are dollar for dollar unless we disagree with it. And that's really the trick, isn't it? Is understanding what's behind their adjustments. Making sure that you're able to pick apart all of those pieces, which really come from that equation, is really how you can set this up to your favor. Another example, say in Dallas, for instance, this is an example of one of our Dallas grids. And same thing, in Dallas, it's a little more complex in terms of their schedule of adjustments and what they use. But for instance, in Dallas, if we go in there, we're often looking at their condition and how they call this. Glenn mentioned the CDU code, I believe, and that condition and desirability and utility is this how they see your property, and we often fight that. But another thing they do is they use an average. So in Dallas, for instance, they use the price per foot, and they'll consider the average, where we think that that's certainly susceptible to skewed indications, and we don't like that. And finally, as opposed to median, they just deal with price per foot in general, and that I often disagree with that too. So I think realtors fall into that trap too often in their CMAs, and they get into price per foot without making appropriate adjustments, and that's really the trick, is understanding the adjustments that are coming at you and how to combat that. So there's another example of say the evidence that we use, and you can kind of just see here that it helps. Glenn's right. It does help to show effectively where your property is and the ones that you're comparing them to. So with that said, I think that another great point, and you mentioned this, is the construction estimates, right? So, but one key thing about that too, Dave, is nobody cares about what it's going to cost you to remodel, right? I don't care and they don't care what it costs you to paint something or replace, if you will, the carpet. Deferred maintenance is important. And if you're a 1970 home and the carpet has never been replaced, take a picture of it. If you've never done anything in your kitchen, take a picture of it, and those will help you. But what will really help you is the estimates to replace them or cure the problem. Cure the problem. So the point is, don't get estimates about the remodel, right? Get estimates about the repair.
Oh, with Grant.
And that's I think that's huge. So
maybe we can.
Other than that, take a look at your neighborhood values and look at properties that are just like yours and see what they're valued at. And then again, try to understand that adjustment schedule and how that affects you. And I guess with that, I'd say
like you can do a lot of shit.
we do that. We also help, as Glenn said. We try to coach as well. But for me, it's kind of about. I would think. Let's see.
He could have said, "I want to jump into webinars." He would never want.
I think anybody that calls, we're going to show them. Just that, kind of the evidence that we had used, and provide that for them. But that's the biggest key. I think there's an expertise factor of, knowing what you're going up against. Glenn used the idea of, and you're right, maybe it'd have been better for Garrett and Dak Prescott, but maybe not. He's fallen out of favor too. So hopefully McCarthy can do Dallas Cowboys a little bit better. But we'd like to be your coach too. And I'd offer this too. We even say this all the time inside our firm is you never know what you're going to get on any given day. Depending on the board or the appraiser, anything can happen. And you don't have much time. You got about 5 or 10 minutes to make 3 key points. I would offer that. And so know what they are, know what's behind them, and keep hammering those things. And we'd love to help anybody that needs help and help you save money. It's easy to sign up with us. Just go on our website, and it takes 5 minutes. We'll send you a DocuSign piece of cake. But our phones are open, and you can also go to our website, and I'll show you here is a pretty simple to sign up as well. So if you want to contact us or start an email chain, we have that availability as well. So I hope that helps.
Okay, a few follow-ups with you. You know, some of the annoying things about Texas to me are the way people don't use turn signals. Of course, I'm annoyed that the Texas Rangers haven't won in the last few years. But what annoys me more than anything is what you just showed, is that there's no standard language for market value, appraised value, assessed value. Everybody uses a different, it's so confusing, and it's purposely confusing to people. And they didn't change it in Senate Bill 2. I just want to mention that.
And I specifically told
I
them
didn't
that.
mention the name of your company. I apologize. You showed it. It's North Texas Property Tax Services. And you have strong opinions on the way
Well, that's
people
pretty
should
eyes,
pay
though.
property tax consultants,
It's pretty eyes.
not the certain way, the way you do it. Tell us briefly, you know, what your philosophy on paying property tax consultants such as yourself.
Sure. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Again, I don't know if you can see me. I don't know if I'm
Yeah, we see you.
not doing something right. Okay, great. Thanks for asking. Well, for me, it's simple. It's aligning your interests, as we say. And I believe in that for all my relationships, right? So, you know, it's, are we working towards the same thing? And so a contingency-based firm or a percentage firm, they're going to work as hard as they can to get you as much savings so they can get paid, frankly. But having been on the other side of the desk, I have seen from my own eyes the type of consultants that are, say, paid on a flat basis, where it's just a one flat fee, right? And they just, there's no effort.
Just put
Of
it
course there's not, because they're already paid.
Drive.
So I fervently disagree with that. That's just my personal
Yeah.
opinion, but
We're the only ones
I think that's one that we take on here too in North Texas. It's and here's the other thing. If we and it goes both ways, because if we don't do well, then we don't send you a bill, and that seems to align our interests, and that's the best way I know how to put it. That promotes trust between the two of us, that we're working as hard as we can.
It's not going to organize the way we would.
Okay, good. So let's go real simple. Let's assume that some of the people in this webinar have never filed a protest before. So in my simple mind, in my amateur way, I've done it different ways every single year for the past 10 years. You know, I filed an online protest, give them a number and hope they accept it, and that's the end of it. I've hired different property tax consultants,
told Sahara
you know, good and bad experiences. I filed for the arbitration.
This week, and so we
Basically, various ways to do it, Will, are one, use comparable properties from your neighborhood and show that they are similar to you, and that they basically are, you know, you're getting ripped off because you're paying more than they are. And you ask a real estate friend generally to like pull the comps in your neighborhood from the multiple listing service. Another way that we've been talking about is improvements that you would need to do in your house that you photograph and maybe even give estimates, which I like to do, to show I could not sell the house unless I ripped up the floor. I could not sell the house until I updated the bathrooms because it's 20-year-old fixtures, etc. Those are the two major ways that I know.
Right there.
What other simple ways are there for the amateurs like me to go in there and do this?
It's been definitely. I know it's been hard for you.
The simple way, I suppose for me is, I think effectively that you've covered it, but it helps with photos, and it helps to show, to kind of quantify what it's going to take to cure something. Understand what's behind the adjustments. That may be a little bit more complex because you might not, a lot of people, it's hard to follow from district to district how they treat effective year or their depreciation schedules, and it's very subjective, or their quality of construction, very subjective. But it is easy to say, hey, I drive by that house every day, and that house is just like mine, and it's valued at X, and I'm valued at X plus 100,000, or I'm valued higher, if you know what I mean. So that is very simple. It is, look, here's this house, and here's its value. What the heck? Or even better, here's this sale, and it's close enough to mine. Never mind your adjustments. Never mind all this academia about depreciation schedules and how much, and we adjust 30,000 for a pool as opposed to what probably should be 15,000. Never mind that. Okay. I mean, here's a sale that's really, really similar to mine, you know, in size and location, et cetera, and its builder, et cetera, and it's sold for this. So just be aware of that. I think it's going there with your evidence, right? And but that's the difference. I got to hammer. I can't say this enough. This is a profession. The property tax consulting is a profession for a reason, and licensure, like, you know, consulting license, for a reason. So if this seminar or webinar is rather to bridge the gap between how to empower you, then not only get your hands on quality evidence like Glenn's or ours, for instance, but know what's behind it, right? Understand what's behind it, because the district's going to have it. Glenn told you himself, the district's going to have this very complex evidence. Try to understand what's behind it, and double check for those inconsistencies. Yeah.
The problem, Will, is that it's very hard for us to find a property tax consultant. In the next month, we're all going to be inundated with postcards from companies and people we've never heard of.
Sure.
And other than that, I don't know any other way people can find a property tax consultant. It's just very, very, very unnecessarily difficult and very frustrating. So a lot of people don't know if they can do this on their own. I can attest to the fact that you can do it on your own. I've done it on my own several times. Sure, I get nervous walking in there. There's 3 or 4 people in the room versus me.
Yeah.
But, the property tax consultant website doesn't really help. The association, the state association doesn't really help either. So I've complained to the head of the Property Tax Consultants Association, and I haven't heard back on that. But that's just something that's very worrisome. Let me just ask, before we go to questions, Glenn, is there anything you'd like to add on what you just heard?
I would just reiterate Will's point about hiring. I completely agree that a percentage of the savings is the best way to go. I know that Will and I, North Texas Property Tax and Property Tax IO, we're kind of in the same space a little bit, but I like to give credit where credit's due, and they're a good company, honest, hardworking, very hardworking. They're there for months at a time, and I think the percentage of the savings it makes them hungry. You can also hire us on our website if you want the full service, and we charge just how they do. Ever since I've gotten into the business, North Texas has been around for a long time. I was inspired by how they did business when I was first starting out. I've kind of gone off and done my own thing and made my own name for myself. But I've kept the percentage of savings as a part of how we do business as well. So I think how they've done it is I would recommend, no matter. And also, if somebody also says they're charging a percentage of the savings, make sure they're charging a percentage of the real savings. Are they taking into account the homestead cap value? Are they taking into account the actual exemptions and the actual tax rates? There's some companies out there I see that they'll just charge a 2.5 or 2.7% general tax rate and not take into account any exemptions and not take into account any homestead caps on there. Or we talk about all the different names you have for homestead cap, but so that's a big part of it too. So make sure that they're actually charging you a true percentage of the savings.
Okay, and I'm really on a mission here to make sure that the basics are covered for people who've never done it before. So just so we don't assume that people know this, you file your protest long before the deadline date for your county appraisal district. And then after you've done that, you wait for a hearing date to be assigned to you, right?
Right. Actually, so when you file a protest, a lot of people don't know this. They think they're filing a protest with the appraisal district. You're not actually filing a protest with the appraisal district. You're filing a protest with the appraisal review board. And so some people get nervous when they get this hearing. No, they're like, oh no, the appraisal district rejected me and I have to go to this formal hearing and all this and that. No, that's standard. That's required by law. That's standard procedure. So if you file a protest, you're actually filing it with the appraisal review board, and by law, they have to assign a hearing date for you. You can file it as long as you want before the deadline. The online appeal systems are open until midnight on the deadline day, but I highly do not recommend wait until the last minute to file the appeal. I actually recommend filing the appeal as early on as you can as possible. File the online appeal, submit your evidence. Don't freak out when you get a hearing date. That's required by law. They can still make you an offer to settle the value anytime between when you file and when you go to the hearing. Be sure and request the evidence though, because they have to supply that evidence to you at least 14 days before your hearing. And they can't alter that evidence at all once they send it to you. So it's a way for you to get a look, for you to make them show you their cards. So it's very important that you request the evidence. I know in Dallas, you have to do it by written request. In certain counties, you can check a box when you file an online protest and they'll automatically do that for you. But the ARB is not something to be intimidated about. They're going to lower your value if you've got good evidence as a basis to do that. So don't get nervous about the hearing. Even I, as a consultant who's done it thousands of times, I still get a little nervous, but I quickly calm down when you realize that they're just tax-paying citizens just like you and me.
Well, and also this year, Senate Bill 2 says that if you file a protest they cannot raise your values because you filed a protest, which is absurd to think that in the past you went into protest and they go, wow, we didn't give it high enough. We're going to give it to you more. You just, so that's a really good thing that happened for consumers. I think we're an hour into this, so I want to spend the last half hour answering questions from folks who've written to us. I think this one, I'll answer the easy ones. I think this one from Tom and Pam, I will protect your last names in these because some people feel they'll get retribution from the appraisal district. But Tom and Pam say, if I protest and get a lower value for my 2020 taxes, can I protest again next year in 2021 if values continue to slide? And I say, you know what, man? Every single year you file a protest. That's my philosophy. Because if you skip a year and it goes up, you're paying that high rate for the rest of the time. So I would say, yes, file it. All right. This is from Eric. And he has a whole bunch of simple questions. He says, if we won our property tax last year, do we have to file again next year? The answer is yes. Right? If we have to file our protest this year, will we have to appear in person? The answer is no.
He kills me.
No. You can do it over the phone. You can do it. And if you don't show up for your hearing, you have a problem. But the pre-hearing negotiations are all done electronically, supposedly now. If we have to file a protest this year, will it be better to show up in person or use teleconference to resolve the protest? Will, what do you think of that one?
Number one, I don't think it's a choice. I think telephone conferences are the way it's going to be this year, unfortunately. Do I think it's advantageous or a disadvantage? I think that can go either way. And I point you to the evidence that you provide. Make sure that they have a copy of it, and you'll be provided from any given county, you'll be provided the means to do that, to provide that evidence. But, circle the points that you want to make, right? Scratch it up. And even another good tip from the Shark is to take their evidence, like Glenn told you to get, and cross out what you don't like. Put big X's on it. Say, this is malarkey. And then use your evidence to emphasize the points that you do want to make.
And the last one from Eric is, if we have to file a protest this year, would it be better to let a professional manage the protest for us? And I go either way. I've done it myself, and I've hired different tax consultants. When do people know, Will, that they don't really need to hire someone like you and they can go in by themselves? Is it about their confidence level or what?
I'm going to answer that the only way I know how, David. And again, this comes from being on the other side of the table. The only time that I felt that I didn't have the edge, meaning as with my appraisal district hat on here, right? So I'm saying the only people that should go in there, in my opinion, are people that understand every facet of what's happening to them, including the law, the math, right? And those are the two big ones. I mean, that's where the expertise takes over. It's what are they legally permissible? What's legally permissible, and what are the standards that they have to follow? Never mind the price per foot jargon that everybody throws around. That's all elementary. And frankly, the appraisal review board member are educated people. The appraisers are educated people, and they're all good people trying to do the right thing. But there's a lot more academia going on behind the scenes, perhaps, than the layman is prepared for. So I say that with caution. But if you want to go in there with confidence and which cases win, do those things that I mentioned. Try to find neighborhood comps that are in their appraisals and that are just like you in size and features, etc. Try to find sales that are the same. Get the estimates that are there for you to fix something, not for you to remodel something. Show them the pictures of that. Okay, those are your use maps. Show them where you're talking about. So those are your big four, I think, to feel confident and do that. Feel confident. It's not like Lynn said. Don't be intimidated. The ARB are people just like you and me. They're trying to help you.
Okay. Hey, Glenn, let's take one last question from, this is from ES. ES, I don't mean last question. I mean last question from that, Pat. But ES says, I want to know what Attorney General Ken Paxton's opinion regarding whether homes hit by the COVID-19 will be affected economically. And Paxton wrote, no, tornadoes and hurricanes damage the house. And when the house is physically damaged, yes, but this is an economic advantage. Our houses are still standing, haven't been destroyed. Therefore, we can't claim COVID. Is that right, Glenn?
Yes, that's exactly right. And this is kind of important because there is a big property tax firm out there, definitely not North Texas Property Tax, but there's a big property tax firm out there that is using this as a marketing tool to get clients, saying that because you have been impacted by the disaster that the governor declared, you're entitled to this exemption or something to that effect. Big firm doing that. I should reiterate again that Ken Paxton, our Attorney General, offered an opinion, said that no, that's not the case. The reason why this all came about was because of Hurricane Harvey. The process before Senate Bill 2, there's a lot of red tape of helping people out that were impacted by disasters. The appraisal district had to request a local taxing jurisdiction, like a city, had to request that an appraisal district reappraise every property in that area, and that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, probably.
So they said, let's just simplify the whole thing and let's make it an exemption, and let's just do something like, okay, if you're 15% damaged, then you get this amount off. It's kind of like a homestead exemption, except a disaster exemption.
we need to
If
put that the next
25% damaged, you get a bigger amount off, all the way up to 100% damage. So it was very easy from the language in the law that Ken Paxton was interpreting, that with the percentage damage, that it was obvious to tie that to a disaster, because how do you assign a percentage damage to an economic disaster? It just can't. So that's why Ken Paxton shot that down. And again, be aware if you see marketing out there from firms that are trying to use this to get your business. Again, it's not, North Texas Property Tax is not doing this. They're good, straight, they do it the old-fashioned way, get your business, earn it the right way. But there are other big firms out there that are using this as a marketing ploy. Just don't fall for that.
Good. This is for you also, Glenn. This is from Karen from Kaufman County. Given that many citizens are planning to protest their property value assessments, are any counties contemplating any type of across-the-board valuation adjustments rather than deal with hundreds of individual protests? For example, making a 20% reduction in the assessed valuations for the calculation of the actual real estate tax that will be due.
Not that I know of, and that would be in violation of their values on January 1st. Again, I think there needs to be a bigger talk and discussion about tax rates, because this is what our elected officials are they're not bound by a January 1st date. They're bound by budgets and things like that. And so if we're looking for tax relief, the appraisal districts have a job to do by law, which is value a property as of January 1st of 2020. They're not being bad people when they assign you a value that reflects that value. They're just doing their job as required by law. And actually, if you're in Kaufman County, there's another reason why appraisal districts have to do this. Kaufman County is a bit of a scuffle with the state comptroller's office right now, because they have not been valuing, even though they've been increasing values. The state comptroller does what's called a property value study every year. Basically, they say, how close are you in values from our appraisals to what you're actually noticing? In other words, are you noticing people at 85% of their market value when we're looking at it being 100%? And they've determined that Kaufman Appraisal District is too low on their values. The impact that has is that the state comptroller they're withholding $1 million in funds for the ISD there. So there's penalties if they don't follow through with that impact the school districts. So again, I think the conversation for tax relief needs to be more shifted to politicians that decide tax rates.
Okay, thank you. This is for you, Will. This is from Dwight. Many of the homes in our neighborhood have been torn down and replaced with McMansions, valued at $750,000 to over $1 million. Other homes have been flipped a couple of times with major renovations and updates, tearing out walls so it's the popular open space concept, recessed lighting, granite countertops, etc. We have not done any of those major structural renovations, nor do we want to tear out our walls to make our home open space, but it makes our home less marketable if we want to sell it, which we do not. Where could I find the costs for bathroom remakes, terrace foundation lifting, not the house, just the terrace, brick repair, tiling a couple of rooms, etc., without bringing contractors, since we have no intention of doing those repairs anytime soon? I would not want to waste contractors' time coming to the house to give us estimates, since we do not intend to follow through for at least a year.
Well, great question. First of all, gentrification is the academic. Maybe we've all heard again. Glenn offered that this is probably a well-versed crowd that we have here, so we all know about that, perhaps. But okay, the answers are: if you don't want to pay for it, you don't want to pay for a service like Marshall and Swift or something like that, which is residential construction cost, and you want to get it for free, then the hard way for free is to take an open records request out for the building department. find out what those building permits are for. Figure out what in your area, for instance, and get the average price per foot. We know, like at the back of our hands, what each district applies these things for. But and so I would say if it's you, you could also Google. There's nothing wrong with that. You can pull up this. You can say, look here, look panel review board. I did a Google search, and they know too. You know what I mean? So you're not pulling any wool over their eyes. But if you need an exhibit, do a Google search and pull that out too. But I guess the answer for me for that specific question would be, and you don't want to get contracts. And if I were you, and it were me, I would pull that information. As a matter of fact, you can get the information from the appraisal district as well. They collect permit information. You could write a records request to the district and say, I'd like to see all of the building permit information, the building permit value information in my neighborhood over the last 5 years. And then you'll get it back in the kitchen permit for 65,000, kitchen permit for 35,000, et cetera. And there's the size of that remodel as well in that data too. So that might be the best way if I were a homeowner trying to do it on my own for free.
And so be clear, you don't need any of this information when you file your protest. You need this information when your hearing is scheduled. Or no, no, that's not true. In fact, I remember maybe in Tarrant County, they actually want you to upload documents as part of your protest, right? So I was wrong about that. How does that work?
Yeah, exactly. All of the districts, and Denton's kind of front runner, in my opinion, or at least I remember Denton being the first one doing that share file. When you filed online, you could drop your evidence files here, and they're doing that again this year, and that's going to make it really easy for us to do the telephone conferences and give them the information that we have. But that's it. No, you don't need it prior to the hearing. You just need it ASAP and get it in the appraiser's hands ASAP. And there you go. Yeah, I think that's the best approach for any homeowner to do that. But I would offer most estimates are free. Most of those estimates are free, and it's good for you to know. And you can date it, when it happened, and get somebody's objective physical eyes on it. So I think that's still the best way.
But one problem now that I just thought of that we have in 2020, we didn't have in the past, was I brought in Lowe's one year to give me an estimate on floor repair, and then I showed that was $17,000. Now people don't want the guy from Lowe's coming in their house in the next month because of shelter in place. So that's another handicap that we have to deal with.
It's a great point. One that we haven't touched on yet because of COVID. There's a lot of changes, aren't there? And so, but hey, I mean, again, and this is where I kind of maybe deviate from the tone of those hate mongers in the penitentiary and all this stuff. The reality is those appraisers that work there, in my opinion, are good people. The appraisal review board are good people, and they're educated and they know it. So if you show them a picture that everything's dilapidated, you haven't, your oven is avocado green, and you got holes in your carpet, for instance, they're gonna know, and they're gonna know that most of the sales you're being compared to have all been, updated, because that, it's kind of keeping up with the Joneses in this market. So I feel like that's the best evidence, photos, and if you can couple that with a Google search that says it costs X amount per foot to replace this room or this area, then you can kind of you can quantify your opinion based on that. Then give them a tangible piece of evidence, which is always helpful. But ultimately, it's going to boil down to the appraiser and their professional opinion and how that applies in that district.
And that's the point that we haven't made, which is every county has different rules and standards. There's no standardization. There are training now for these review boards, but okay. Question comes from Rod Constant. I think I want to take this one because this is one of my favorites. He says, is there a way to eliminate the board protest fee? Well, there's no protest fee to file a protest with the appraisal district. However, there is a fee. He's probably talking about binding arbitration. And there was a fee that's approximately $500, $525. I actually paid it 2 years ago, much to my wife's dismay, but I knew that whatever happened, I was going to get a column out of it. So I just attributed it to something I had to do for work. So I paid $525. I filed for the binding arbitration, and they canceled it, and they gave me the number that I wanted. And in my county, they also give you the same number for the next year. So I probably have the lowest property taxes per square footage on my street. And so I do recommend binding arbitration. However, it costs $500, and if you lose $500. So that's the tough part there. Anybody want to say anything about binding arbitration?
Just really quickly, if you win, it's still going to cost you $50. Just keep that in mind too. Yeah, that doesn't really. Yeah.
Hey Dave, on the binding arbitration, this is the benefit, and Will knows this as well as I do, that of working in multiple counties, that they all approach binding arbitration differently. I think the county that you're in is a little bit more favorable to taxpayers when you file arbitration, but there's other counties that fight tooth and nail on that. And so they may not make you that offer, and they may make you go all the way to the arbitration. So I would take that with a little grain of salt, that it depends on the county that you're in, how easy the arbitration might be.
Yeah, and how do you find that out?
Talking to people like me and Will. They work in multiple counties.
I'll say this as a final point too, Dave. In my experience, I give it about half and half for those arbitrators, in my opinion, of being well versed in the law and Standard 6 academics. I haven't been that impressed so far with about half of them. I'm just going to throw that out there.
So be careful with what I said, because I just got lucky. This is Dave in Richardson, and he says, I have the impression that the property tax homestead exemption is a deferral of the tax liability rather than a discount. In other words, the deferred amount will come back at a time of a home sale and need to be paid at that time. Is this true? I think I know the answer to that because I've written about that. The property tax homestead exemption, which no longer do you have to sign up for it. Under Senate Bill 2, they're automatically going to give it to you if you qualify for your primary residence. That is a discount. That is a subtraction off your value.
No.
And what I think that Dave is referring to is the tax deferral for seniors. Once you become a senior, you can defer your property taxes till your death, but then when you die, your estate is sold and the money comes, all those property taxes that you didn't have to pay comes back out of your estate sale. Do I have that right?
Yes, although I don't think they automatically apply the homestead exemption to you. What they do is they have to mail you, is this your home? They have to be proactive in asking you if it's your homestead. Whereas before you would have to tell them this is my homestead. So they're not automatically going to apply it there. They're just going to send you a mail, a certified mail that's right, asking if this is. You still have to respond to that and say, yes, this is my homestead. And also, Dave, you wrote an article about this a couple of years ago with the over 65 tax deferral. There's some watch outs with that. If you don't, you wrote the article. You can probably speak to it better than I can about the mortgage. If they have a mortgage on it, the mortgage being sold, then they could call your taxes at that point. So the best advice is, if you're going to defer your taxes, make sure you own the house outright, and that's the safest way to do that. Because otherwise, if you're tied to a mortgage and the mortgage company sells your mortgage to another mortgage service provider, they can say, we're not going to honor the over 65 tax deferral, and they'll call all those taxes due.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that for me and for all of us. Okay. I think one thing we haven't talked about at all, and we just have to mention this for this video to be really complete for people, is let me plug my my battery in here for my laptop. Basically, this is only one part of the process. The other part is what happens in July and August, where cities, counties, school districts, hospital districts, and junior college districts, they all basically take that appraisal and multiply it by the tax rate. And so we're blaming the appraisal districts for high taxes when really we need to be blaming the taxing districts, right? Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, Glenn, I'll jump all over this one. It's one of my favorite topics. And there's a chain on one of our Facebook posts right now where I'm going back and forth with a guy. And one of the best examples that I can offer is here's what's frustrating to me is there was a chief appraiser that had suggested to Abbott that we hold the values the same, and how that's the empathetic thing to do. And I was very frustrated by that, really frustrated. And I think most people are confused by that, because no matter what they do with the value, the collective value, right, or what we call the certified appraisal, Standard 6, the county's value, no matter what happens to that, the taxes then are going to be calculated based on whatever happened at hearings and budget settings, a few months prior. So even if they hold the values the same, your taxes can still go up. And that's one of my favorite topics that I love to talk to people about. And yes, you can increase, and yes, your taxes may go up relatively if they increase your value relative to last year, for instance, or relative to a new tax rate. And same. They may go down if you drop it, particularly during protest season. But the point is taxes, all else being the same, taxes go up and down as a function of what happens at those taxing entities.
Will, this question came in by email from Pat. She says, for Will, explain again for Tarrant County what Tarrant Appraisal District is calling the effective year. No penalty
Sure.
for my neglecting to repair my property? Question mark.
Yeah, great. Let me show an exhibit again, if I may, Dave.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, because ours
Hold on. Pass the,
is,
well, pass
I'm not seeing that option here, but
Passing
that
it.
may have to be the presenter here. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So let's see here. But I'll talk while we say this here, is that the effective year is effectively, sorry, no pun intended, but it's an opinion of what your age is. So, for instance, in this example, and I'll pick on this 2006 right here. This is the actual year built of this home in 2006, meaning no question that's tangible. It's you can't debate that, right? And that's what we like about using that as an adjustment line or as an adjustment, itemized adjustment. However, let's say that they had a remodel or something happened to the property and the district came in here and changed their effective year, right? And let's say that they put it as a 2010, for instance. And in Tarrant, for instance, they give all the weight in the adjustment line for age. They would give all the weight, if you will, to the effective year, which is this line here, right? So at my firm, for instance, we disagree with that. So we give half of the weight. 0.5% is what the district does. 0.5% of the improved value per year. Never mind that, but we give half of that. We give a quarter point to the actual year and a quarter point to the effective year. And the point is, to answer the question about the effective year, is that basically it's an opinion, and we disagree with them being able to say our opinion about how your property is perceived in age is not as important, or is at most just as important as the actual date of construction, and that's irrefutable in our opinion. So just bear in mind that between the effective year built and the quality of construction, and in Dallas the condition, right? So in Dallas they use both condition CDU and the effective year to toggle value, and you got to look at both of those things, right? But in Collin, for instance, Collin is just like Tarrant. They only look at effective year built. So it's just an opinion, and you ought to be able to go after it. And the way to go after it is to go look at other appraisals around you and other homes that are like you, for instance, and make sure that their effective year built is the same as yours, for instance.
Okay, we only have 9 minutes left, so let's go through these questions as quickly as we can. This is from Cheryl, and she says, since the stay-at-home order has been lifted by the governor, why can we not demand the appraisal districts hold informal hearings in person? The success rate is much better than the online process.
Well, keep in mind that the stay-at-home order, there's still all kinds of restrictions with numbers of group gathering sizes. So like, for instance, restaurants can only be at 25% occupancy. The appraisal districts in a normal year attract thousands and thousands of people, and there's hundreds of employees that work there. So there are some legitimate health concerns of just going straight into, okay, we can all show up in person and file an appeal. But I think kind of in the bigger picture, what they want is they're concerned about fairness. Is they want, so let's just say that we progress through and we're in July and we're feeling a lot better about coronavirus, and where we feel like we could go in person to the appraisal district. The appraisal district is concerned about keeping the same processes for everybody. And so they're going to make a decision about, okay, if somebody comes in May or June and we don't, or not comes in, but we don't allow them to come in and we settle the case, how would it be fair if we allowed somebody to come in July in person to settle the case? So they just make the decision to adopt policies and apply them out of fairness for everybody. That's my take on that.
Good. Let me go to Roy. He says, I recently qualified for the over 65 exemption. Will my house market value increase in spite of that? And what portion of my Tarrant County property taxes will be subject to an increase? Is there still a good reason to protest?
I'll take this one, Glenn, as just can't wait to jump all over this. I find it ironic that the only taxing entity in Tarrant that doesn't freeze is the hospital. So I generally like to equate that as about 10%. About 10% of your tax bill is still susceptible to the taxable value increase. Of course, the one that's affected by the limited homestead. But yes, it's always, as Dave says, it's always important to protest, and you can always get it below that frozen value as well. So you need to be aware of that.
Denise wants to know where she can learn about Senate Bill 2. And rather than read this giant bill, which I showed you a moment ago that's thick, I did a story summarizing it. So probably if you just type into Google Dave Lieber and DallasNews.com and Senate Bill 2 explanation, it'll pop up. If it doesn't pop up, just send me an email to watchdog@dallasnews.com and I will happy to forward you the URL. Let's see, here's one from Mohan. At a hearing, is the appraisal district allowed to change the comps used from the ones presented earlier?
Great question. I'll take that one. And the answer is not if you filed your request for evidence. As Glenn said, and he's spot on, ask for a copy of their evidence. They're required to give it to you 14 days before your hearing. Once they give that to you, they cannot change it. And that's part of Senate Bill 2, is that they have to show you what they plan to introduce. And no, they cannot. You can never be at a disadvantage. They don't want you to be at a disadvantage. So whatever they showed you 2 weeks ago is what they have to stick with.
Hey, let me piggyback on that a little bit, because Will's exactly right. But again, I want to emphasize, you have to request that. If you go in for an informal and they just show you comps, but you don't make an official request for it, they can actually change the comps at that point. So make the official request, just like Will is saying, and then that locks them into it.
Our webinar.
Barbara says that she has successfully fought her property tax increases for the last 3 years. Congratulations, Barbara. That's really great. But she says she did it in person and she felt very successful.
It's been a long.
Do you have any advice for me on how I continue to have my winning streak alive, even if I'm only allowed to do online protests and not the personal visits that I like?
Shoot my video on
Okay.
I'd come back to those 3 points. It sounds like she's doing great, but all the points that we've made during this webinar are the ones that I would focus on for any argument, any year, what you're doing.
Okay. This is from JR. Why is the homeowner forced
We
to
have like
prove
40
a
going.
lower value for the home when the appraisal district claims that the value they provide is gospel?
Well,
He's
I disagree with the premise of that a little bit. So keep in mind that there's two different standards of valuation in the appraisal district. When they send you out notice values, that's based on one standard that looks at computer modeling. They use aggregate information, so your average price per square foot for similar properties, and then that's how they notice you. When you file a protest, that moves them into a completely different standard evaluation where they have to look at your property specifically. They have to pick individual comps for your property. So that's the extreme advantage of filing a protest, is that you get the special attention when you file the protest. You get the custom valuation job, versus when you do the notice, you're letting a computer that's doing aggregate information like averages control your value.
I'd only say that they could echo one sentiment. I hear the tone of that homeowner, and I would say that remind him for me that the burden of proof is in fact on the district. They have to prove that value. So that's a key point to always emphasize.
Yeah, there's something that you can look up, folks, called the Texas Property Owners Bill of Rights, which basically, it's a beautiful document. It's probably not followed that well, but it basically says everyone is entitled to a fair and uniform property value, and it just gives you all these rights. So Google Texas Property Bill of Rights. And also, if you want to do some further study on this, I recommend a column that I wrote, which is called Take This Quick Quiz and See How Much You Know About the New Texas Property Tax Law. And if you just Google that, my name, Dave Lieber, you'll be able to take this quiz, which is really kind of fun, and it shows you all the different things which we've talked about, but in Q&A with multiple choice, like the SATs. A quick wrap-up, 30-second wrap-up from you two guys before I read a final limerick from Bruce Davidson, Mr. Limerick. Will?
Go ahead. Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Sure. Thanks, first of all, for having me. Thanks to everybody for logging on. We feel your pain and empathize with your plight. I like to hear it from Glenn that he's there to help you. We are here to help you. It is more complex. While I don't want you to be intimidated, you may be. We understand that. So we're happy to exchange anything. We give free analysis to anybody that calls. We tell you about what we think and what we see. Stay away from just that marketing ploys. Be leery of those promises on those marketing letters. If you're going to do it yourself, do your homework, stick to key 3 points, have your evidence with animated notes and emphasizing your points. And with that, we'll tell you good luck.
Glenn? farewell words before I?
Yeah. So if you're attending this live or if you're viewing it later, you're part of the people that have, you've wanted this information, you've gone for it, but there's other people that don't know that they really need to hear this. And so spread the word, be a coach in your neighborhood. If you've gone through this before, get more people involved in the process. In Dallas County, I did a study, only 20% of all the property owners in any given year file a protest in Dallas County. Over the past 5 years, less than half of all the properties have filed a protest. We need that number to be way higher. There's too many people that are not engaged in the process. And so we need you guys to spread the word and get more people involved in the process. And, Dave's a great resource for that.
Thanks, guys. I want to conclude by a few things. Everyone, for the future DMN download, the virtual events, and other important information, continue to check our weekly rewards newsletter on Tuesday. My Watchdog Nation newsletter comes out on Wednesdays. It's free. Sign up for that. Stay up to date on the new developments with coronavirus. Sign up for the coronavirus newsletter from the Dallas Morning News. Information will be sent to you on how to do that after the call. I specifically want to thank the two people that put this together. They worked really hard, Jessica Cates and Kimmy Hazelwood of DMN Rewards Program. I want to thank you for joining us. If you aren't a member of the Dallas Morning News, we're glad you were able to attend, and we hope you'll continue to support local journalism by subscribing today. And here's my final limerick, okay, written just for this moment. The game plan from Dave, Glenn, and Will give your appraiser a chill, because you could rinse his appraisal in cinnamon basil, and it's still going to smell like a still. And with knowledge from Will and from Glenn, you're chock full of facts for the win. And wrapped up by Dave, you're ramped up to save on your property taxes again. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Everybody file a protest. See ya.
Thank you, Dave.
Stay safe, everybody. We love you. Thank you for joining us.